I learned that I could see things, feel things, know things that I wasn't really meant to know. If I learn how to cure myself, then maybe I can help other people. Peter is my spirit guide, and that's who I was communicating with all this time when I was younger. And interestingly enough, he is actually my dad's great-great-great-grandfather as well. I 100% believe that everything that happened, happened for me, not to me.
Hello, and welcome to the Jeffrey Eisen podcast. This podcast is about using spiritual wisdom, insights, principles, and practices to integrate and embody into your life in a practical way. My guests share their story of their spiritual journey, as well as how their spiritual beliefs, insights, and practices have helped them live a better life. Their life stories help others understand and accept life's challenging opportunities for learning, expansion, and growth. And my guest today on this Sheltazar episode of the Jeffrey Eisen podcast is Michele Marie Liddle from Norfolk, UK, all the way from UK. Thank you so much for joining us, Michele. It's really a pleasure. You and I have chatted a little bit in the past, and I love your story, I love your energy, and I love what you are doing. Why don't you share with the listeners a little bit about who you are and your life story and how you got to where you are today?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and share my story with you. Where to begin? Well, it all began with the beginning of my life, really, is the best place to start, I suppose. So when I was very young, I learned that I could see things, feel things, know things that I wasn't really meant to know. And it was a very bizarre experience because to me, it was absolutely normal. To everyone else around me, it was the most bizarre thing ever. And it was labeled as the typical imaginary friend. But it was so real to me that there was a funny moment where we had a parent-teacher interview, and the teacher mentioned about Peter that I'd been talking about constantly, and she assumed it was just like an older brother. And she mentioned it to my mum, and my mum kind of rolled her eyes, and the teacher thought she'd spoken out of turn and was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, is it a child from like another marriage?" And my mum was like, "No, it's her imaginary friend." But to me, he wasn't imaginary. He was very, very real. And that's kind of where it all started. And he was so real that I would make my mum put down a dinner plate for him because I knew he was sat at the table. So I was like, well, he needs to eat. He's like there. Why can't anyone else see him? So it was so real. And as I got older, when you go to school and stuff, I started to think, well, everyone else is thinking I'm really weird that I can see this person, speak to this person, hear this person. I'm constantly engaging with this person, but no one else can see him. So that's when, as I got older, you realise that it's just you and no one else is like aware of it.
Michele, sorry to interrupt at this time. How did that make you feel when you had this knowing, this imaginary friend, of course, that was not imaginary, it was a connection to the invisible world, and yet all around you there were people that didn't understand it, couldn't support it, couldn't nurture it, and quite the opposite, thought it was weird. How did you feel? Can you recall back in those days?
I think when I was at that age, I was very much the child that had her head in the clouds anyway. I was very creative and sort of always drawing, always outside playing, running and stuff. So I was kind of just caught up in the magic of myself. It wasn't until when I got probably to the age when I went into first school that everyone else was kind of not talking about the things that I was interested in or understood. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, why is everyone else like so interested in learning maths and I just want to go play with my friends? and be like a free spirit. And I just didn't understand like why I had to. I remember sitting in school and being taught how to read the time, and I was like, I don't want to know how to tell the time. Like, why do I need to tell the time? And getting really frustrated. But I remember people being like, you need to learn this, you need to do that, feeling so trapped already. And I was like, surely this shouldn't be happening. Like, I shouldn't be in this like institution almost. And I mean, my parents have always been quite supportive, whether they understood or not. I had a great grandmother actually who was the local tarot reader, or tea leaf reader as well. And so that was kind of already spoken about a bit in our family. But everyone was just like, okay, well, she needs to put her head down and get on with schoolwork and, learn and grow that way. So that was more pushed on to me. But I always felt that conflicting, like, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be doing this. Like, why are people telling me what I need to be and what I need to do? When I kind of already must have had a sense of who I needed to be and what I needed to get on with and accomplish in the world. So that was really like restrictive.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever wondered or dreamed what your life would have been like if people did understand this gift that you had?
Oh yeah, massively, massively. It's
Tell us a bit about that because that would have been a lovely story. Obviously, not the one that you were to experience, because I believe everything is for purpose. Sheltazar leads us to believe that all life has purpose, and so being denied your gift to be able to come later in life and find it again. Not that you're so late in life because you're very young, but the fact that you didn't have it accepted again was part of the plan. But let's just talk for a moment about what you think your life would have been like if your gifts were recognized.
Yeah, I think it would have been very, very different. I think I would have felt so much more at peace with myself. And I mean, I said something the other day about how much I admire people that, go into school and go, I want to be a doctor. And then they grow up and they become a doctor because they knew what they wanted to be. But because I always had this confliction, I never knew. And I struggled like a lot with that. So I guess if that had been like I'd been supported, I would have had a much clearer sense of like who I was and my mission in life, and not had like all the upset, trauma, confusion, conflict, and misguided paths and all sorts of things that I'd experienced now. And being at 35 now is where I'm questioning it all and being like, okay, so this is what I'm meant to be doing. But if I'd known at a young age, I would have been so much more confident and so much more living my purpose, and I would have helped so many more people than than I am currently, because I would have been doing it for so much longer.
So much longer, right? But you might be doing it more intensely and to a different degree. But for the listeners who are out there who may have children like you, gifted ones, because I truly believe that we are in a period of time. Sheltazar leads me to believe that the energy of the planet is shifting, and there are many young ones coming forth with these gifts. What advice would you give to parents who believe that they have these children that they don't understand?
Yeah, this is quite an important one, and we spoke about this previously. My niece is very gifted, massively gifted, and she came out and said that she was Wiccan because she'd got into that kind of modality and she was interested in that path. So I brought her some tarot cards, showed her how to use them properly, told her all about it. I got her crystals. I've told her all about saging, cleansing, protecting her energy. I wish that someone had told me all about that stuff, because it probably would have helped me no end. And, just sitting with her and having conversations about that to let her know that what she's experiencing is like the most wonderful thing ever, that she is lucky that she has that experience. And I wish someone had done that for me. I mean, my parents have always been like understanding, but they didn't understand properly. They didn't know how to tell me that what I was experiencing, at nighttime was completely normal for me, and how to nurture it and how to grow it so that I felt comfortable. I spent many years being terrified of what was happening. And sometimes I still do feel terrified because it's taken me so long to learn now, I feel, had I learned earlier, I would have it all under control possibly now and not be experiencing,
Right.
things that I can't explain.
Yes, but again, please keep in mind, Michele, that again, all life has purpose, and it is important for the work you're doing to realize that you went through the journey that you did for a reason. It's interesting, that your parents and you raised a very, very interesting point, and that is that often parents do not understand the gifts that their children have from a place of intuition and connecting to the invisible world. And, just like your parents sent you off to school to learn mathematics and time, and they didn't feel compelled or have the ability to necessarily teach you, they entrusted you to the educational institution. There are so many wonderful healers out there. There are so many wonderful light workers that if, as a parent, you can't understand where your child's gifts are coming from, please seek support, just like you do to the traditional school, just like you are for your niece. And so I think you're serving a great purpose by not having her deny those gifts, because I know you and I have chatted, the fact that you were unable to feel comfortable with your gifts led you on a journey of considerable hardship. Maybe you want to tell the listeners a little bit about what happened.
Yeah. So because I didn't understand, I did I suppose I always understood what was going on some level, but, no one else around me was the same. So I tried way too hard to find friendships that I could bond with, way too hard to find relationships that I felt comfortable in. It ended up with a lot of, in the end, depression, stress, massive anxiety. I ended up getting involved in things that I shouldn't get involved in, just to kind of also numb and dull out what was happening to me as well, because I had no way of finding out what was going on or anyone to speak to, that I went down the path of using drugs and alcohol to kind of numb it all. And it got to a point where I ended up getting so stressed out about it all and so lost and confused that I went to the doctor and I pretty much begged for some kind of help. And all he said to me was, we can give you a tablet just to numb everything. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm already numb. I can't get any more numb than I already am. So I walked out of that office, and that was the day that it all turned around. And I was like, well, I'm not taking a pill. I'm going to try and figure this out on my own. And that's where my self-development came in. And that's what led me back to the path that I'm on now.
Tell us a bit about that path of self-development, because there's a lot of opportunities in this world now for self-development, and I am a big fan of it. I went on that journey when I was 50. You obviously went on it when you're younger. There's a lot of resources and opportunities out there. Share with the listeners a bit about what your journey of self-development was all about.
Yeah, so when I came back from that doctor's, I actually went on YouTube, and I think I must have just typed in something like self-help. It's something really straightforward. And I was flitting through everything, and I saw Les Brown, and I was like, oh, he looks really happy. He looks like he could possibly help me because he's so cheerful. So I pressed play, and I was listening to it, and so much of, if you ever listen to him, he delivers things in such a way that you're kind of magnetized to him. And he said the words, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but it was basically the principle that so many books, poems, movies, epic stuff, cures for diseases, all sorts of things, are buried in the graveyard because so many people don't fulfill their purpose through fear, through lack, through not having the confidence or the understanding to take it further. And that really resonated with me. And that the next day I actually applied to do my life coaching diploma, and I was like, well, if I learn how to cure myself, then maybe I can help other people. And that was like the beginning of the bug. I've got so many self-help books, spiritual books, mindset books, YouTube all the time, podcasts. I just completely threw myself in to figuring out how to make myself better and understand. And obviously then went on to coach people, help people, and also get other coaches. But if I don't know something, I will learn it now or find someone who can help me to understand it better. It's just like a bug that I have now that I need to do that.
Yeah, it's an amazing community of self-help, self-development, self-fulfillment. It's really great, and it's a great time to be alive. I mean, the good news is that although you did go through that suffering and hardship, you weren't alive at the time where you would have been burned to the stake as a witch. So we've certainly come, and hopefully in generations to come, like your niece, people won't have to go through that hardship that you did. But there is a tremendous community out there. Coaching is growing. I'm not saying that just because I'm a coach and Michele is a coach. I will tell you, and I'm sure Michele will agree, that it is one of the most gratifying vocations in the world to be able to help another human being, especially because of the suffering that we went through, and just that knowing that by sharing with someone else, they don't have to go through as much suffering is quite gratifying. Would you agree, Michele?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think there's something really rewarding about it. I mean, my husband doesn't particularly understand it because he has a very practical job. And but I always say to him, like, I may not have got paid today, but I know I made a difference. And to me, that's the main thing. Like, the rest comes, if you trust what you're doing and you're just constantly living in your purpose. And, I do a job that I would actually do for free anyway. Mm-hmm. It's nice to get paid, but,
Oh, yeah, that certainly does. That doesn't serve us by not getting paid, and that's a whole other conversation. But it is really important as healers, as coaches, that we do get remunerated because we are doing very valuable work. In a message that I channeled from Shaltazar, they pointed out how the ancients really revered their healers, and they were very much up at the top, close to the chief. And so although it appears to us that it's easy and simple, that's just because of the gift we have, and we shouldn't belittle that, and make sure that we are compensated for the value that we bring to humanity.
Definitely.
Yes. Tell me a bit about what it's like to live with your husband that is supportive, but doesn't understand life the way you understand life. You had parents that didn't understand. This is obviously different. I know a lot of couples where one of the couples is very gifted and the other is not. So maybe share with the listeners some practical advice on how you can coexist with someone who doesn't necessarily share your spiritual beliefs.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I've never been asked that before. That's a good question. So it is interesting. The dynamic is very interesting. He has a very high pressure, high stress job. So for me, I always find it quite awkward when he comes in and you can see literally the rage on his face from having such a bad day. And, you just want to, what I do, for me, if that was me, I'd just go meditate for 10 minutes and I'd feel completely better afterwards because I've got myself back in my energy and explaining energy to him. He's very scientific, my husband, as well. So we do have interesting conversations. And he loves history and all of that. So we do have these in-depth conversations. But his view is very different to my view. But it's being, I suppose, human with it and knowing that not everyone's going to see your point of view. Not everyone's going to see things the way you see it. But explaining it and I suppose still respecting what that other person's got to say about it. He's not disrespectful in any way about what I do. Sometimes he makes the odd joke, but that's just his sense of humour. And I just go, oh, whatever, and sort of brush it off. But he buys me meditation cushions for Christmas, oracle cards for Christmas, crystals, because he knows that's what I like and that's what makes me happy. And, he does his things and I support what he does. So it's all about finding the balance, really. And, it's love at the end of the day. And
you read my mind on that one, Michele. I think that's exactly what it is. It's love, and part of love is that mutual respect. And so I think, kudos to you and your husband for allowing your relationship to have such a solid foundation of love. And I believe that when we are in that place of love, we don't have to compete. And I think that's why the two of you can have these conversations and have different perspectives and different points of view, because it's not a competition. Often people argue because they think that if their position is not right and the other person is right and they are wrong, then they don't feel worthy. And I think the antidote for that is love, because the fact that you both love each other, you don't have to, I'm repeating myself, you don't have to compete, and you don't have to worry about him being right and you being wrong. What's kind of nice with love is you can both be right and yet both be different.
Exactly, yeah. And it is funny, I always joke with him because I've had both of our numerologies done, and I'm a 7-11 and he's at 8, but he's going to be, his life path number or destiny number, I think it is a 7, the spiritual one. And I always say, just wait until that number 7 kicks in. You're going to understand everything I've ever spoken about.
Right. And in an earlier conversation, I believe you said that he was in law enforcement, right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Right. And we can certainly understand, the listeners can now understand the stress. And, it's important to realize that we all can make a contribution in society in different ways. And certainly people like you and I, healers, are important. But the reality is that societies, that civilization is very diverse, and we do need law and order, and we do need law enforcement. And I'm not sure whether I will live long enough, probably not, to see the day when law enforcement, is full of spirituality, because law enforcement tends to, by its definition, need to be black and white. But that doesn't mean, I think it's really fabulous that your husband is supporting you, because whether you know it or not, you are planting seeds when you sort of say, wait till that number 7 kicks in. And so he's getting this stuff in a way, in a very subtle way, that sometime in his life, things may shift for him. So kudos for you to have this loving relationship. And maybe that's part of why you had to go through so much difficulty and trauma in your younger years, so that you could appreciate being married to someone in a relationship of great love and mutual respect.
Oh yes, definitely. I 100% believe that. Mm-hmm. I know that's why a lot of that happened. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Maybe Peter had a bit of a hand in that.
He did, yeah. He's still about, I didn't mention that, did I? But I've recently found out, since going into my spiritual side, that Peter is my spirit guide. And that's who I was communicating with all this time when I was younger. And interestingly enough, he is actually my dad's great-great-great-grandfather as well, which we don't really know much about that side, because they were all in the military and died quite young and stuff. So, which is fascinating. But yeah, he's always been there, always helped me, always guided me. Right.
He's just changed roles from your imaginary friend to your guide and spirit guide, eh?
Yep, definitely.
Fantastic.
Funny how these things work out.
Oh, it is. If we could only have patience, and that's important. I certainly feel bad, Michele, that you had to go through that difficulty, the drugs and the alcohol. But it's really important to hang on and try to work through that. Shaltazar says that darkness is our greatest teacher, and I'm sure that you would agree that all of that difficult times you had has made you a better person and has taught you a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. I always say that within, like, there's nothing, you can't find light without darkness, and you have to, experience certain things to get you to where you need to be. And I 100% believe that everything that happened, happened for me, not to me.
Right. Yeah, and the fact that you went through such a difficult time, may have encouraged you or inspired you to be, a great life coach, and you do Reiki and you do all kinds of other healing modalities. And if you hadn't gone through that difficulty, then maybe you wouldn't have been as good a healer as you are today.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that. Yeah. 100%.
Why don't you share with the listeners some of the healing you do, some of the interesting stories that, I love talking to coaches because we have some really fascinating stories of healings and people. Anything in particular that you want to share with the listeners?
Oh, what I find more interesting, I mean, I'm very new to coaching. I only got my coaching in 2018, so I've sort of been trying to find my path with that all through my awakening. But for me, what I find most interesting is how we all experience all these different, like, I've spoken to people who have suffered horrendous things. I always thought when I was in my sort of going through my period, like, oh my God, poor me and all the rest of it. But when I hear like other people's stories, and the fact that I've got such a heightened intuition that I know exactly which path to guide them on, which healing they need. Someone can ask me a question and I'll know exactly like which path to guide them down and where we need to go and what questions I need to ask them to kind of dig a bit deeper. But it always amazes me how quickly things can turn around just in that one conversation. Just having an open conversation and holding that space for someone where they can completely offload to you, the most horrendous things that they've experienced, because you might be that only person that they've ever told that to. And, for some reason they've been drawn to you to actually offload all this so that you can then hold that space to actually help them and guide them through to the next steps. And it's just seeing people have like the breakthroughs and the, getting messages where people are like, oh my God, today I handed in my notice. I finally made that choice to, go down my path of spiritual teaching. Or, they've decided to start a family. I had one client who decided that she was going to start her own business and finally have a family. And, making that change in someone's life is massive. But, I just give them the steps. They do the work. And I think that's an important thing to understand in coaching, that you're there to hold the space and guide the people and to, point them in the direction. But they do all the hard work behind the scenes, the healing and the crying. And, sometimes we cry together because I'm an empath and sometimes I just can't help it. But yeah, I mean, that's the bit that I love most about coaching. I can't say that I've got any particular like bizarre stories. But
no, that certainly helps because, and as a fellow coach, I can identify. I had one of those breakthrough sessions this morning, and it's rather remarkable how, as coaches, we're guided to create the space for these breakthroughs. And I also like what you said about coaches. We are truly guides. We're very different than therapists. We're very different than counselors, and especially spiritual life coaches, where we count on our own spiritual guidance to help create a path for the people we work with, and that's fantastic. I think I highly recommend coaches for everyone. I had coaches, you had coaches, we are coaches. They are a very interesting breed of healer.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think it's great that people are, coaching obviously came about to give people like us an area where we were able to do what we do in order to help people, which I think is brilliant.
Absolutely. Another question, Michele. You were fortunate and unfortunate to have the gift of intuition, the gift of connection to the invisible world at a young age. So it was rather innate. It was just part of who you were. Not everyone is born with that, and I'm sure that you've come across people who want to become more intuitive. They want to become more connected like you, but don't know how. What kind of advice do you give to people that didn't recognize this from birth, but want to develop their sense of intuition and connectedness to their spirit guides?
The best bit of advice I would give is, and I still struggle with this sometimes, is learning how to listen within. We listen to a lot of what goes on around us, and we have the internal chatter, and it's listening to what is coming from your heart and your soul rather than what's coming from your brain, because your brain likes to trick you, and that's where the whole ego comes in. And I've struggled with this quite a lot, where my ego will tell me, because I'm a very logical person, we had this discussion before, that my logical brain tells me things, and I have to really listen hard to my intuition to go, no, you two are having a fight again. And it's learning to like understand the difference between them, which all comes with practice, and it's not being so hard on yourself. If that makes sense. I hope I explained that well.
No, yeah, no, definitely. The intuition feels so much different than logic, and I've had this conversation with a number of clients lately. We all have the ability to tap in to one of the pathways, clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, or claircognizant, and so it is important to give space. I find that sometimes just quieting the mind and letting the obsessive thinking consciousness go, you can tap in. And that's why, of course, meditation, Michele, you mentioned meditation. I'm a big fan of meditation. Meditation is just that opportunity to quiet the mind. And often when you quiet the mind, you will find that connection is there. I believe that we never lose the connection. We just lose our ability to connect to that connection, if that makes sense. And so by spending some time in your feeling consciousness, Sheltazar talks a lot about the feeling consciousness, by tapping in to your feelings, you will have an opportunity to connect. And as you mentioned, intuition feels much different than the logical mind. So in order to really know whether things are coming from your logical mind or from your intuition, you kind of have to have that sense of feeling to know which one it is. And then I'm always a big fan of just practicing it. I said it before, go into a big parking lot that's really crowded and let your intuition guide you to a parking spot. Try little things. When the telephone rings, right now it's kind of hard because we all have this call display, but don't look at the call display and see if you can get a sense of maybe who's calling you. We have to exercise our intuition. We have to give it an opportunity to come out and play if we want to be able to connect to it.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Another little tip that I just suddenly thought, obviously given to me, was that when I feel like I'm really in that crowded space in my mind, I tend to do what I call a brain dump, where I literally just write down everything I'm possibly thinking or feeling before I then go be quiet and be still, because the chances are that I've got everything that I need to out on paper, so my brain isn't thinking, you've got to do this, 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 and this. So I then am in that quiet, peaceful space that allows my intuition to come in, which I think is a great tip for, like, if you're like me, a mum as well, and you've got 100 million things to do in a day, but you still want to tap into know what your intuition is telling you about things.
Yes, I love that one. Thanks very much. And if you don't mind, I'm going to use that exercise to suggest to some of my clients the brain dump or the mind dump, just to pour out. In other words, to sort of exhaust the thinking mind so you can take a break from it and then connect into your intuition.
Yeah, it's great to do when you're meditating as well, when you had a stressful day, is do that before you go meditate.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Even to this day, sometimes in my meditation practices, I've learned to have the discipline, but I notice when I, finally sit down with my crystals and put on some meditative music, my mind is starting to give me a half a dozen things to do. And if I give in to those things, then I'll never get to the meditation. And I've actually been aware of it. It's probably between 1 and 3 minutes at the most. And if I can hang on past that 1 to 3 minutes of not listening to my mind telling me things to do, it seems to give up, and I can then get into a very, very deep meditation.
Yeah, it gets bored eventually, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When you're like, I'm not listening to you.
That's right. So practice. Michele, we're just about out of time. Thank you so much. It's gone by so quickly. It's been a fabulous conversation. Why don't you take a few minutes and tell the listeners a bit about what you do and how they can get in touch with you. Your bio will be in the description of the podcast with your contact information, your website, and your social media. But just tell the listeners a little bit about you. Even though you are in the UK with technology, we are so easily connected. What are some of your offerings and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed myself.
It has been my pleasure. You've been an excellent guest. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. So I do all of my work online. I love working online and connecting with people like yourself all over the world. As some listeners will know, Reiki that I offer, distance healing, Reiki doesn't work on a timeline, so I can work on people in Australia. I've worked on people in Bulgaria, all over the world, and they experience exactly, well, not exactly the same thing, but no difference in, whether it's effective or more effective. So I do Reiki healing. My one-to-one coaching, I offer a 12-week program where I work predominantly with women. Reiki I can do on women or men. It's just the one-to-one coaching. I connect more with women and we go through divine feminine work, empath stuff, life coaching, all sorts of things. It is completely guided. I'm quite averse in a lot of modalities as well. So we go full in and it's a wonderful experience. My clients have told me that, not me. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do, one-to-one coaching and Reiki healing.
Excellent. And people can connect with you on your website, which is?
My website is michelemarieliddle.com.
Right.
All one word.
Right. And that's Liddle, Liddle. And again, that website and all of the contact information will be in the podcast description. Thank you so much, Michele, for being a great guest. I really appreciate it. The time went by so quickly. Once again, my name is Jeffrey Eisen. Thank you for listening to the Sheltazar episode of the Jeffrey Eisen podcast. I am a spiritual life coach, channeler of Sheltazar, and an energy intuitive. Please check out my website, jeffreyeisen.com. Lots of content, lots of resources, the messages of Sheltazar, these podcasts, some written information. Thank you so much for tuning in, listeners. All the best, love and light to you all.